Resuming debate, the honourable member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to my colleague from Carleton for leading this motion today and for all his work on behalf of taxpayers and all Canadians, but especially on behalf of the most poorest and vulnerable among us, the people who are struggling to make ends meet every day. This Liberal carbon tax is already making things so much worse for families and for businesses across Lakeland, Alberta, and Canada. Before the Liberals unilaterally announced they will force a carbon tax on all of Canada, the Finance Department completed analysis on how the tax will impact everyday Canadians. Both documents were released through an access to information request, but much of that information was redacted and blacked out. It's clear there's information contained in these reports that the Liberals do not want Canadians to see. And Canadians can be forgiven for asking what the Liberals are hiding, just like when the Liberal members rejected a Conservative motion to study the impact of the carbon tax on the natural resources development in Canada in committee. But of course, we know why they're keeping facts from us, why they're resisting releasing this information to Canadians. It's because the Liberals don't want us to know how damaging it will be for businesses, for families, for communities, and for the poor. This reckless cash grab will harm small businesses. A local business owner from Lakeland runs a family-owned trucking operation near Bonnyville. At a town hall, he explained the price of everything will rise and the cost of fuel his trucks will increase dramatically. He fears he'll have to lay off up to 4 staff from his already small group of employees. Trucks that are in perfect working condition will sit empty as he won't be able to afford to run them. Like him, business owners across Alberta are warning consumers and clients that they'll have to pay for this increase in operating costs, which will happen to almost all businesses across all of Canada, small, medium, and large, most of which ship and receive goods that are transported by trucks. Businesses will have no choice. They will have to figure out how to cover off these cost increases through higher prices, through layoffs. The Liberals pledged to be an open and transparent government. In fact, the motto on the Liberals' website is openness, transparency, fairness. But how is unilaterally forcing and then hiding the true cost of this new tax on everything open, transparent, or fair? School boards will need to cope with millions of dollars in extra bills. Alberta school boards have requested an exemption from the tax, warning about the possibility of mass layoffs without it. The answer? There could be a rebate in the 2017 budget from the provincial NDP. But school boards are already facing the additional burden of this new tax. The Elk Island Catholic School Board in Lakeland will incur an additional $82,000 in increased costs for the remaining school year and $143,000 next year, specifically for transportation and infrastructure costs. School board trustees question the ability to budget for replacement school buses in the future. Rural and small-town kids biking and walking to school is not an option. Municipalities will also struggle with this tax. The town of St. Paul worked to keep spending as low as possible this past year, knowing the carbon tax would make it even harder to stay in the black over the coming years. The town of Vegreville did a projection of what the carbon tax will cost based on their fuel usage, and it will increase the town cost by $36,438 in 2017 and up to more than $54,000 in 2018. These are significant costs for small towns, for municipalities, for counties. And all Canadians will feel this pain. A Lakeland resident recently shared a bill on Facebook which showed an extra cost of $778 on a single truckload of energy products that was delivered to his home. This is the biggest tax hike in Alberta's history. It's not environmental policy. The federal Liberals and the provincial NDP are manipulating caring for the environment, a priority shared by all Albertans, all Canadians, all parties, and it's crass and disingenuous to suggest otherwise, to justify this cash grab, falsely claiming it will earn social license and reduce emissions. But Alberta has always actually been a leader. Alberta, in fact, was the first jurisdiction in all of North America to regulate emissions and to apply a targeted $15 a ton carbon levy specifically on heavy industrial emitters, only on heavy industrial emitters, including oil sands producers. That was in 2003. Alberta leads Canada with biofuels and off-gas capture projects in the north and with wind and solar projects in the south. This all started more than a decade ago, yet here we are with both provincial and federal politicians falsely claiming that this new massive cost increase of everything for everyone will suddenly stop extremist and foreign-funded activists and protesters, international attacks from competitors, protecting their own competitive bottom line to try to push Canada out of oil and gas development and get pipelines built. It's nonsense. Federal and provincial representatives instead should tell the truth unabashedly at every opportunity, in every situation, across Canada and to the world. Alberta produces the most environmentally and socially responsible oil and gas in the world and operates under the highest standards and the most stringent regulatory regime of any country on the planet. The result has been innovation and energy development that has been the driving force of Canadian prosperity and government revenue for many decades, increasing the standard of living of every person in every community, benefiting every province and every region. Alberta has earned its social license many times over. So has all of Canada. And I notice repeated misrepresentations, especially from the Liberals, also from the NDP, throughout this debate, of economists and Conservatives who support carbon taxes for emissions reduction. The fact about those economists is that they almost always also promote equivalent regulatory and red tape reductions and equivalent reductions in corporate and personal taxes. Those economists are usually proponents to shift taxation from personal and corporate taxes to consumption and carbon taxes entirely. Those same experts, like an economist who helped develop the Alberta NDP plan, also say carbon taxes have to be about $150 to $200 a tonne to be punitive enough to cause significant emissions reduction. But that's not what the Liberals are doing. No government in Canada is proposing that, which makes the point. This scheme is a cash grab. It's not about environmental stewardship or emissions reductions. Yet what they are doing will be disproportionately harmful to rural, remote, northern Canadians, to agriculture and energy-based communities, and to the most vulnerable, those who can least afford it, to the unemployed, low-income Canadians, people on fixed incomes, the working poor. The fact is, neither the U.S. nor any of the other top 6 major oil and gas producing countries in the world are even proposing or adopting carbon taxes because they know it would be harmful to their economies and bad for their people. It's stunning that the Liberals would force Canada down this road, regardless of the way it will seriously undermine our competitiveness. Even in the case of BC, often hailed as the best example of the carbon tax, every year since 2010, BC emissions have increased. There's been no significant reductions in gasoline purchases. It's not at all the case that the options are A, a carbon tax, or B, do nothing, as the argument is often framed. That's a false choice to justify a revenue generator that will increase everyone's cost of living, the prices of all goods and services, and will hurt the most vulnerable, the people who can least afford these higher energy costs because they're a higher proportion of their income. I oppose the carbon tax for these reasons, and because it will not do what its proponents claim. Bad policies which undermine competitiveness, increase costs, and hamper productivity with excessive red tape will deter investment and innovation. It's private sector investment that will generate the development of alternative and renewable energies long into the future, and it's conventional oil and gas companies that are already leading that way. We shouldn't kick them while they're down. We should be having fact-based conversations about environmental policy and outcomes. We all strongly believe in protecting the environment and in economic development. But we should be clear what's actually being proposed in Canada right now. The Liberals' carbon tax isn't about the environment. It's not about emissions reductions. It's a cash grab. And the Liberals need to tell Canadians how much it will end up costing all of us and the damage it will do.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North. And I just want to remind the side that I'm sure the Honourable Member doesn't need any help when he's asking his question. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, I say, that we have provincial Liberal governments, provincial Conservative governments, provincial NDP governments that all came to the table and have agreed with the Prime Minister and this government that now is the time for us to have carbon pricing. Now, the member made reference, Mr. Speaker, to, well, what about the school division that's going to need more money as a direct result? And she somewhat answered the question by making the statement that it is going to be the province that will hopefully, maybe, it's up to the province to determine. What we have done is we're saying that, look, we believe that the time is now for a price on carbon, but it is going, the revenues generated from that is going to the provinces. Ottawa is not getting any money out of this, Mr. Speaker, and you will find provinces will deal with the issue that the members have raised. My question to the member is, does she not agree that with the price on carbon, that it is best that the revenue goes to the provincial jurisdictions? This way they are able to address some of the issues that the member has raised today.
Member for Lakeland.
Well, no, because I oppose carbon tax. But the minister or the member seems to have a foggy memory of what happened there. In fact, at the beginning of a debate about meeting targets in the Paris Agreement, the Prime Minister stood up before any debate occurred, before any MP could have a say, before anybody could represent their constituents, before anybody had any ability to consider a policy proposal or the impacts on their communities, the Prime Minister stood up, preempted that entire debate, and announced his government would be forcing a carbon tax on every community and every person in Canada from coast to coast to coast. That happened on the same day when provincial environment ministers were gathered together for a meeting where they thought they would be negotiating a framework of the federal government about how to deal with environmental policy and with international commitments going forward. And I don't know what the member recalls about that. Perhaps he's been so long in here it's affecting his memory. But environment ministers walked out. A number of environment ministers.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Longueuil.
The honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Here, I would say that the Conservatives' selection of facts is somewhat pitiable. I would like to know what is the member's perception when they talk about transparency. It's your carbon capture and storage strategy, which had cost Canadians a fortune. How much did that cost as a mistake, as a technological error that led to no results because nobody followed up on it? What did that cost Canadians?
Well, the debate, of course, is over the impact of the carbon tax on all Canadians, and the Liberals refusing to release the information, the facts to Canadians about what the carbon tax will cost them. And so we all know what happened. Without debate with members of Parliament, without consultation with provincial governments, the Liberals announced that they would be forcing a carbon tax on every person in every community in Canada. That's the focus of this debate. Canadians are entitled to that information. If the Liberals believe all their words about fact-based, evidence-based decision-making, about consulting with Canadians, about caring for poor people, for the middle class, for small businesses, for families, from Canadians from coast to coast to coast, they would release this information. They would reverse the decision to force every Canadian and every province to undertake a carbon tax which will harm all of us, increase the cost of everything, and undermine Canadian competitiveness internationally, and do untold damage, which individual government rebates and token amounts mailed out a couple of times a year that don't help people pay their bills when they actually have to pay them, and will never cover all of the costs that this carbon tax will incur.
Bravo.